So we're happy that you're able to join us today. We have um, a pretty packed agenda for a conversation. And this is what I always say, although the webinar is free, the information and the conversation is priceless. So hopefully you'll all walk away with some valuable information that you'll be able to apply immediately. I hope you walk away with a deeper understanding of what is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I want to provide also a historical context to that and also talk a bit about its meaning in the workplace. And then, of course, parlay that into the importance in coaching. Most especially, I want you to walk away with some immediate next steps that you can take. We've got a lot to get to, as I mentioned, and I want to ensure that we leave room for questions as well as conversation. By the way, the chat is open. Feel free to put some of your thoughts in there. And I'll also be taking a look at the Q&A. And if we have any questions that come about, I'll make sure to do that as well. I also ask that everybody keep themselves muted so that we have good quality recording here. And we are able to hear each other and more importantly, hear myself, right? Awesome. So what is DEI? What is DNI? What is DIB? What are all these combinations of words that we hear? Diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. It's all about creating safe places where people feel welcomed and nurtured, places where they can thrive. That's it. Let me repeat that. Creating safe places where people feel welcomed, nurtured, and can thrive. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging are the ways in which you create this environment for individuals. Let me think about it and put it in the context of workplaces. Workplaces where we bring people together, total strangers with different backgrounds, different experiences and beliefs, and we say, okay, collaborate, be successful, thrive, be happy. And we all know in this competitive world that we live in, this just doesn't work. What does work is when organizations, the leaders and managers of these companies, intentionally spend time listening and learning about others so that deeper relationships and greater respect can be developed. If we engage with each other through a lens of curiosity rather than judgment, we can actually learn from each other. In this way, everyone is able to bring their whole self, where they're seen as their unique selves, where they're understood, and more importantly, where they are respected. And they feel the sense of belonging. There are structures, there's systems, there's policies and practices, and even programs that are equitable for everyone. So let's summarize it. In workplaces, diversity is intentionally casting a wider net to find a more diverse representative group of qualified, skilled, and talented candidates who then become your employees. Equity is about designing systems and processes so that people from all backgrounds have a fair opportunity to do their best. Inclusion is about creating cultures where everyone can be their true self, focus on the work at hand, and thrive. Belonging is bringing all of these things together so both the business and the people can win. Now, this is hard to achieve, getting all of these aligned, and you need all of them. And so much of who we are today and how we interact and what we need to do, whether it be diversity, equity, inclusion, or belonging, is actually steeped in history. So I want to just talk a little bit about history. Now, I happen to be a history buff, so apologize in advance. But I always ask myself, where does this all come from anyway? So think of it this way. All countries have had their history shaped by social, technological, environmental, economic, and political climates. We call that STEEP, STEEP, social, technological, economic, environmental, and political climates. Every country globally can chart the journey to what led them to discussing D&I today. So historically, it begins perhaps for some with the story of the Jews being enslaved in Egypt. Others, Buddha in the 6th century BC had slaves. Others point to the escalation of slavery in India during the Muslim domination. This is back in the 11th century. And others to the 1400s when Spanish and Portuguese explorers met with tall people of Africa, which leads us to here in the USA. Yes, I am based in New Jersey. I have a bias for US history or the impact of global history to us here in the United States. I was born and raised here, live here, work here. Our history in the US is defined by the African American experience, the treatment of Indigenous Americans, then the equal rights of immigrants, women, people with disabilities, LGBTQ, and so on. All who have fought for equal rights. A day doesn't go by, though, someone says to me, Patty, I understand the history. I understand all these voices, all these different differences that we have, but all lives matter. And yes, I agree. While all lives do matter, not all lives have been given equal value, and not all voices have been equally heard throughout history. And so in so many ways, what we're really doing is continuing to catch up with and or correct for what's happened in the past. And this is what history teaches us. It teaches us why it is important to understand diversity in the context of history as we try to listen and hear all voices and let them be heard. In corporations and governments and even in universities, it's the 1964 Civil Rights Act here in the United States and then affirmative action that led us to thinking around diversity and inclusion today and then into equity and belonging. So why is this so important? Again, what has history taught us? Well, I like to call it the dollars and cents. And this is a little play off of dollars. Yes, that's dollars, bottom line revenue, profit, and cents. Sense in the mind of it makes sense. It's good for the country. It's good for social, good for economics. It's good for the environment, right? So dollars and cents of it. I know this is an eye chart and I apologize in advance of that. But just focus in maybe on any one of these 32 data points. Any one of these 32 data points. And they will exemplify how many different ways the power and the value of diversity and inclusion has been measured. You can look across the positive social change, greater flexibility and productivity from decision-making to profit and revenue, increases in innovation and creativity, which leads to the expansion of products into new markets, and also decreases or avoidance of costs, such as turnover or litigation. So in the end, it goes back to creating safe places where people feel welcomed, nurtured, and thrive. And when people thrive, everyone wins. So now that we know what DEIB means and where it comes from historically and why it is so important across the political and economic spectrums, let's turn to you. What's your history? Why is diversity important to you? Let me ask you a simple question. When was the first time you felt different? What's the story you would tell? And what did you feel? What were the emotions that you experienced during that time of difference? If you have access to chat, go ahead and put them in there. I appreciate it. If you're on LinkedIn, go ahead, put some words that Lucy can see and convey. But I want you to describe the emotions of that story, that feeling of difference, as I convey to you my story. For me, it was when I shared my first kiss. Yeah, most folks tell stories about when they were like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, because this is when we begin to identify what difference feels like or what it means. So I was in the first grade and I kissed Lance Tillman. He was so cute. Anyway, my parents found out. They were appalled. They were so upset. Now, many of you might be thinking that they were upset because I was so young. In fact, the reason why they were upset is because Lance was Black. I am white. See, it was 1969 in New Jersey. We were on the back end of the race riots coming out of 1964 history. Right? And it was a very, very difficult time. And my parents' reaction made me feel as though I had done something wrong. They made me feel shame and actually confusion. So think about your story. Think about your story. And what did you feel about being different? I've asked this question to thousands of people and over globally, by the way, globally. And overwhelmingly, the answer was they felt lonely or alone. That is what most often individuals say they feel when they come into that moment of feeling different. Sometimes it's an outcast, right? Not included, sometimes folks say. But I just want you to think about what that must feel like, because we experience the world every day with moments of feeling different. Some of us carry a feeling of difference with us every day, everywhere, all the time. If it always feels, or even sometimes feels, lonely or shameful or confused or alone, that's a burden that takes a significant amount of energy to overcome. When we express our diversity, when we think of our diversity, we tend to have negative thoughts and feelings. And yet, these are the memories. These are the memories and emotions that we carry with us, our lived experiences that make us who we are, who make our employees who they are, and coaches who make our clients who they are. These emotions are carried with them as well. We all see and experience the world differently, and being different is hard. Let's explore all of the differences that we might have thought about in our stories. As I mentioned, we all see the world differently. We experience the world differently. And diversity is not just race and age and gender, which we generally hear talked about most often in the public, in the news, in the media, etc. The dimensions of diversity come in many, many forms. My model here, which is based on pioneering research by Loden, Rosner, Garden-Schwartz, and Rowe, I represent 3 layers from the primary, the biological, which is what's there in the green area, what I call you're born this way, through the secondary and tertiary levels where you or others have made decisions that have impacted your life, both personal and at work. So it might be you decide to go in the military, or your parents or the folks that you were living with decided to move to a different country, a different geographic location. These then are elements that bring difference into our lives, into our lived experiences, which make us different too. It's important to note here that nearly all individuals experience multiple dimensions at the same time, what Elizabeth Crenshaw termed as intersectionality more than 30 years ago. See, she was both Black and a female. So when asked to identify your dimension of diversity, she needed to explain that it is multiple. There are at least 2, many even more, coming together, converging together to make up who we are as human beings. We're all so different, and we bring these dimensions of diversity everywhere we go. This drives our values, drives our belief systems, and at times we're unaware of the way diversity impacts the way we perceive others, and also importantly, how others perceive us. It's that friction, it's that misunderstanding that is sometimes the cause of anger, frustration, fear. When we're not understanding and truly listening and learning about each other's dimensions of diversity. All of this can shape our perceptions, but they can also put up barriers of understanding. In the work I do with coaches, I ask always that we start the work reflecting on ourselves. How would you describe your dimensions of diversity? Which areas of diversity most influence your thinking, your values, and your beliefs? Most importantly, how might these thoughts, these dimensions of diversity, these values, these beliefs, how might they impact your own coaching style? How might they influence the bias you have that you bring into a coaching exchange? And as you reflect on these dimensions of diversity, we also need to think and understand the role that diversity plays with our clients and their state of mind, their belief systems, their values as they walk into a coaching session. What dimensions diversity shape their beliefs and their values? Do any aspects of their diversity marginalize their self-value, their self-worth? And if so, what might they cover up? What might they be afraid to bring into a coaching discussion? Let's get a little deeper into these concepts of diversity and coaching. I want to move our conversation into our current ecosystem, because our ecosystem, what is going on in the world around us, influences ourselves as well as our clients. I want to reflect back first. It was 2017 International Coaching Federation, the ICF. They released a global study that they did in partnership with PricewaterhouseCoopers. And in it, they found that 96% of respondents indicated that they would repeat a coaching experience. 96% were coached and would come back for more coaching. 86% of companies who were able to calculate the ROI on coaching engagement said that they at least made their investment back, and almost 30% of those saying that they saw an ROI of anywhere from 10 to 49% their investment, 49 times their investment. Now, this is fantastic. We should cheer. This is why we're coaches. These are the statistics we use when we're going in to say why coaching is important. And while this is very optimistic, I want us to be aware of something else that surrounds both us and our clients. Politically, there's been global instability from China to Russia to North Korea, as well as the Middle East. Here in the US, there's huge swings from Obama to Trump to Biden. Technologically, around the world, we are divided. Either you have technology and access to technology, or you don't. This creates a huge inequity about how we have commerce or education or even access to clean water. Environmentally, our ice caps are melting at a faster rate than ever. California has had devastating rain and snow, while the sub-Saharan desert and African desert and India, extreme drought conditions. I mean, we can be here anywhere, actually, in North America, and we can be getting air quality advisories due to fires in Canada and volcanoes in Iceland. Economically, a recession has been looming for more than 3 years. Many countries are in recession. Meanwhile, companies are reporting record earnings. Unemployment is hitting another low in the United States, and yet there's so much poverty around the world. There's no wonder that Gallup's State of the Global Workforce survey shows that 85% of people around the world are disengaged from their work. And finally, socially, we all know that 2020 brought a global pandemic, global civil unrest, due in part to the murder of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Mahsa Amini's tragic death for not wearing a headscarf in Iran. Women are still paid significantly less than men, and it's even worse for women of color. Think about what's happening with LGBTQ rights around the world, from Florida to Uganda to Russia. Now, the reason I go deeper into this STEM concept and paint this ecosystem is, yes, coaching is working. Yes, there's a high ROI, but we need to be aware of what's going on around the world globally across these specters, because this is the world in which we are coaching. Now, why this becomes both an opportunity as well as a challenge is because the same survey by the ICF indicated that 58% of the coaches are between the ages of 40 and 60. But the global mean of the world is just over 30. 63% self-reported as white. But whites are the rarest race on earth at under 10%. 66% reported as female assigned at birth, but the world reports less than 50% female. 59% of the coaches that responded to the survey were from North America, although North America only represents about 7.5% of the world population. 19% report having a disability, while the CDC reports that about 26% of adults have a disability. So you can see the contradiction here of who are the coaches, how successful coaching is, but yet who is in the world and what's going on around the world for our clients. By the way, there's no data reported or collected on LGBTQ, no data reported or collected on ethnicity, and no data reported or collected on socioeconomic status. So the concepts of the economy aren't even mentioned in this report. So again, this is where there's both a problem and an opportunity, right? And this is where we as coaches need to lean in, because we know coaching works. The world is under duress. We need more coaches. We know it's working. And the demand is increasing more and more to meet our clients where their cultural and contextual space is. We have to meet them where they are at. But there's a discrepancy with how and who we are as coaches and what the world needs from us. So how do we adapt? How do we flex? How do we meet the needs and the expectations of our clients? What I call bridging the differences in our experiences in order to build these safe spaces that D&I is all about. We need to become coaches that deeply understand diversity, because the diversity is all around us. The diversity is embedded in the lived experiences of our clients. As you can see here on the screen, the ICF says we need to cultivate trust and safety. We need to seek to understand the client within their context, which may include their identity, their environment, their experiences, their values, and their beliefs. But how can we do that when, as coaches, we are so different from our clients? Think about that. I ask you to just think about that for a minute. How different are you from your clients? If your clients all look like you, you're missing a huge market opportunity to be selling your services to people who are different than you. And we have to be ready for that. We have to be ready for that as coaches. So what's the answer? What I give you to think about are 5 things that you can do today in order to bridge the difference between what's going on in the world, how we and our clients are showing up with all of our differences, our lived experiences, in order to create these safe spaces that we could better understand the beliefs and the value systems and contextually understand and relate to our clients so that we can give them that return on investment. Of course, the first is to acquire a certified diversity coach designation. This is a program that I created after 25 years in diversity in corporate America and then becoming and moving into the coaching industry. I recognize that coaches are not talking enough about diversity, even though diversity is one of the most important identities that our clients carry around with them. The ICF does a fantastic job of providing frameworks for competencies and ethics, but they don't give us the how. They don't tell us how to have these conversations, how to reframe our questions, how to ask the more difficult and deeper questions of our clients through the lens of diversity. And that's what our certified coaching designation program does. It enables you to continue your education, gaining 12 ICF credits, but it actually makes sure that you understand not only what is diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging, but how does it apply to the coaching exchange? How do you bring it into your coaching sessions with you? Reading, travel, research, expanding your thinking definitely helps, but you need to be in a safe environment where you can express, practice, and experiment different ways to engage with your client through the lens of diversity. At the end, this also helps to differentiate you as a certified diversity coach, which many organizations or companies are asking for now because of the importance that is being placed on diversity. By the way, it also opens you up to a whole new area of client that you could be reaching out to. Very briefly, the other things you could do today, write your diversity and inclusion statement. What do you believe in? How does diversity and inclusion enter into your business, into your coaching, into your style? Who do you market to? Is your marketing really gearing towards an inclusive environment, regardless of dimensions of difference? And ensure that your resources and technology are accessible to all, bias free, especially for those with hearing and visual disabilities. We do rely so much on listening and or reading, seeing in our coaching exchange. We have to make sure our technology is ready to receive all. Also check your assessments to make sure that there no bias in them as well. For many, it's just simply turning on captioning in some of the technology that we're using and exchanging with our clients. Confirm either your company's selection process or your own, if you're an individual practitioner, your own manner by which you're selecting individuals into coaching. Make sure those processes are inclusive. So often, coaching in corporations are really targeted to VPs and above that are high potentials. But not everyone is being elevated into those programs. Not everyone's potential is being identified and celebrated. And finally, this is something that's near and dear to my heart. How do we assist historically underrepresented and or marginalized individuals become clients and coaches? And in here, you can devote your time to the ICF, some of their educational offerings that they have, pro bono coaching to others. You can also give to their educational scholarship foundation that allows, gives the opportunity for marginalized individuals to become coaches. But mostly what we're doing in this is we're becoming an advocate. We're becoming an advocate for all to be coached and an advocate for all to become coaches. I want to give you an example of one of my prior students, I'll call them alumni, is now what I refer to the more than 75 individuals that have gone through the program and have gotten their certified diversity designation. Think about this situation. So this student shared that they were coaching an older white woman, coaching a younger Black woman in Canada, I believe. I hesitated, this is what the student saying, I hesitated to inquire about the question of possible racial bias that might exist in her workplace. She had been discussing how she'd been frustrated with career progression and what she perceives to be differential treatment from her boss. But the coach admitted that she didn't want to add another worry to her pile if I was off base. How would I even say, how would I even suggest such a question? How would I approach my client in this situation? What would you do? How would you phrase that question? Would you even ask that question? What would be holding you back? So the student asked, is what you're feeling a result of diversity factors for you? Now, she admittedly said it wasn't her best question, but as it turned out, she was glad that she asked the question. The client said so because it changed the timbre of the relationship and of the discussion. And it allowed the client to better explore her feelings of being discounted, sabotaged, overlooked, while still being clear that she wasn't going to stop pursuing her career plan. As we know as coaches, a simple question can change the tone, the intent, and the outcomes of our coaching sessions. So being aware of these opportunities is key. Looking for these opportunities is important. We have to understand the dimensions of diversity and bring them into all of our conversations. So we are better trained to hear and listen and respond when a client is leaning into their dimensions of diversity. Once the trust has been established, once the client is sharing their lived experiences, if you're leaning into their dimensions of diversity, you can ask different, deeper, and yes, more difficult questions about themselves. Your clients deserve the respect to be totally seen and heard so that they know that the coach is coaching their whole self, their whole being. It's important to practice hearing what the client is saying and asking questions that might be more difficult or even uncomfortable for you as the coach if you've not done this before. You need to be aware of yourself, not judgmental, without self-doubt. You have to understand your bias and how to manage that all within the context of coaching. By the way, for those of you out there who are not coaches, every time I said the word coach, go back and listen to the recording and change out the word leader or manager. Because whether you're a leader or manager or coach, this is the way you develop deeper relationships with your employees and your clients, is by listening and hearing through the lens of diversity. This is just an example or some examples of what we explore in my program. Embracing diversity in coaching, I believe, is the most singularly important aspect of coaching today. Today, more than ever, the expectations of coaches continues to change. In fact, I think expectations are increasing, that we have even a broader knowledge and awareness of what diversity means and go back to steep socially, technologically, environmentally, economically, and politically. What we do know is that our clients, whether they're in companies or as individuals, have greater expectations on us. When we discuss their lived experience, we need to respect their differences, whether through a diversity lens or a cultural lens, or both. And again, this might be gender, gender identity, ethnicity, race, thinking style, perceptions of space and time. Yet, uncomfortable truth about today's coaching profession is the disturbing lack of diversity among professional coaches and the lack of understanding about diversity amongst coaches. That's the reason I created the program. Now is the time for our profession, for us as individual coaches, to explore ways of enhancing the client's experience by embracing the client's diversity and bringing it forward through our coaching exchange. This means we as coaches need to reassess our coach approach. It requires us to do some work on ourselves, to understand our dimensions of difference, to tell our stories, to explore our bias, and ultimately change our coach approach, adjust it. And then we aim our focus at our clients so we can see them through the lens of their diversity and lived experiences and engage in that conversation. If we're not talking about the dimensions of diversity that impacts our clients' lives and the way they see things and believe in things, are we really coaching the whole person? That is the question that we need to be asking. So that's what the program is designed to do. So many of the topics we discussed about today are brought into it, but we go deeper into the skills, techniques, practicing, talking about ourselves, partnering with others to truly understand both what skills and techniques we need and how we should be applying them and addressing them through the lens of diversity. So in the end, as coaches, we hopefully have understood today that we need a wider lens for inclusion as a powerful tool for us to bring into our industry and into our coaching interactions with our clients. A lack of understanding among coaches and leaders means there's a real risk that clients may unconsciously or even consciously edit which parts of their whole self they bring into a client session. And therefore, they might limit their overall experience, which decreases the ROI. My greatest fear is that if coaches do not embrace diversity, clients might not even engage in coaching at all. So we have some work to do here. We have some things that we can do in order to increase the industry, increase our coaching experience, and increase ourselves in order to embrace diversity in every coaching session. So those are my kind of thoughts and ideas for today. What I'd love for you to do is just pause for 10 seconds. Lean into your curiosity. Convert your thoughts into a question. Think about some of the things that I said today that might have been new or different or things you might not have heard before. And the impact that we have as an opportunity as a coaching profession to embrace diversity and really change the course of coaching. And place that into the Q&A, place that into chat. I'm going to open it up to Pablo, Lucy. Are there questions out there? Are there comments? What are folks asking or saying?
So Patty, I'll jump in for a second. Thank you for very, very rich and it's the angle in the awareness that this conversation brings to, for me at least, is very interesting. Especially when you were showing the graph around the different levels, right? Coming from a different culture, I moved to Canada 20-some thousand years ago, 23 years ago. But I grew up in Mexico, coming from a French-Russian background. So I was, believe it or not, I was different in Mexico, my look. And so I always felt alienated and I didn't realize it. So the biggest awareness that I got from that conversation or that slide is like, it doesn't, obviously the closest circle, or I guess the diversity we're always brought into our awareness is the difference in, maybe, what's the word? The differences in, whether you, in what you're attracted to, right? Versus something as simple as, hey, I just look different, period.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that was a big awareness, and appreciate that very much.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Pablo. I really do. And it's so interesting is that um, it, there's so much opportunity for conversation and discussion. We're always seeking out to better understand ourselves, right? And yet, if we don't really explore some of the things that we've experienced in our past, it's difficult to then understand how we become who we are and how we do better going forward into the future. I mean, that's what coaching teaches us, right? And there's so many conversations I have with individuals where they might be struggling at work, and then we realize that it might be born and raised in Mexico but working in the United States. There's so many cultural differences there. um, how you fit in, how you're perceived, digging into some of these things beyond just the surface, but truly understanding the multiple dimensions that we have as individuals and that we carry with us all the time is very important. Unfortunately, I think that for a lot of reasons that I won't go into right here, but for a lot of reasons, we are more and more hesitant to get into the deeper conversations to understand what are our similarities and what are our differences and why. And yet, that is um, the junction where we begin to better understand each other and we learn from each other and we can begin to respect each other's differences, and put it into some context.
Hmm. Yeah, 100%, Patty. And that question that you put out there from one of the students, what I realized about that question is a lot of it is fear of what can happen if you bring that conversation into the forefront, number one.
Mhm.
And second is not having the tools on how to approach that conversation.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that, Pablo. So I just saw Jennifer's comment here. What are some ways? I love the reference to the whole person approach. What are some ways we can approach this with our clients? How can we ensure we understand the client's intersectionality? The first thing I would suggest to you, Jennifer, is you have to be purposeful, right? So by even it being here today and having this webinar, your mind is already thinking more broadly. You're already opening yourself up to the fact that there are many more dimensions to what's going on between your conversation with your client than just what they're sharing, right? And so, what I would share with you is a good practice, best practice. For me, it actually starts on the intake. Okay, so you all have your intake questions. Many sell the first 45 minutes are free, get to know you, what have you. Are we good fit? Whatever. Um, I explain to my clients right up front that I'm a little bit more provocative. I'm a little bit more challenging in the questions that I ask and the places that I go. And I demonstrate that by asking them to share a little bit more about themselves that might not otherwise come up in a conversation. And then I push them a little bit, politely, respectfully, right? But I ask them a little bit more about their home life, their hobbies, whether they're spiritual. I ask some questions that might otherwise not be asked. That's step one, and there's ways that you can ask that again, respectfully, appropriately, right? You don't come at them, but more importantly, it's throughout the time that you are then establishing trust, rapport, and respect between you and your client. The more the client opens up, the more the client opens up, the more you know about them. The more you know about them, the more information you can put together to ask different questions. I recently asked a question to one of my clients based on information they had shared probably 3 or 4 months ago about themselves. Um, Situation was that they were talking quite a bit about this feeling of aloneness, actually, and isolation. They had started a new position, new organization, and they're having real-time onboarding, real-time assimilating into the organization, into the culture. And so I said to the individual, how are you introducing yourself? What pronouns are you using? Well, as you know, Patty, I use they, them. Because see, my client is non-binary. And that is a very hard conversation introduction to have in a culture and with individuals that you don't know how you're going to be received. You don't know um, how folks are going to react to you. And what we found out after a lot of conversation, just because of that one question I asked, was that there was a lot more hesitation to make introductions. There was a lot less going out and meeting new people, even though it's a new organization and a new job. And so that directly impacted the way my client was assimilating into that organization. But just that one element of sharing, that one element of that dimension of who they are, changed the tone of the conversation. So, Jennifer, thank you very much for that. I truly appreciate it. Lucy, are there any other thoughts or questions there? Comments?
No, not for now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Pablo, is there anything else that came up that I could answer?
No, not at this time.
Okay.
Patty, I think you've covered a lot, and yeah,
Very
I'm still, my mind is definitely opened up.
Yeah.
And
You know how passionate I get about this topic.
Yeah, no, it's great. I love it. I always love it. And so I don't know, anything else for you, Lucy, that came up?
Very good information. I feel inspired as well. And thank you very much as well for sharing this, Patty.
Absolutely. And again, as always, please get in touch with me through coachingoutofthebox.com. And there's always somebody standing by to answer questions. Coaching Out of the Box not only offers this class, but there's at least 2 or 3 other classes on diversity and inclusion and what that means in your organization or in your coaching practice. And I'm available through them to do what is necessary to change the world, one person at a time. So thank you, Pablo, and thank you, Lucy.
Thank you so much. And also, Jennifer and George, thank you so much for being here with us today. And I don't know how many people were involved in LinkedIn as well. So thank you so much for your time, and Jennifer and George. I don't know if you guys have any questions, any further questions? No? Okay. Yeah, thanks, George. And we're available for anything else that might come up in the next, little bit as well. Awesome. Okay. So if there's anything else, thank you so much. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, George. Okay. Awesome. That was great, Patty.
Yeah, thank you.